Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome back to One Question with Pastor Adam. And I am Adam, and I am pastor to believers and to doubters, to unfaithful Christians and to faithful atheists and friends. Jesus wasn't afraid of questions. So each week here at One Question with Pastor Adam, we will be talking about a question that you have sent me over Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, wherever it is. You can email me too. That would be awesome. Hi, Emily. Good to see you. And we'll go over some questions. This is season 4, episode 2, and we are off to a great start here on season 4. Last week we had Sharon Put on, and Sharon is a professor of religion in Pennsylvania at Messiah College. And we talked about ancient Christianity and how what we call today progressive Christianity and this kind of view of a nonviolent God of love has been in the Christian tradition from the very beginning. And so if you're interested in that, I just always love finding like that progressive Christianity, what we think of as progressive Christianity, is rooted in ancient Christianity. It seems like very strange to say that, but it's absolutely true. And Sharon and I go over that in greater detail in the first episode of season 1. So hi, Linda. Good to see you. Aislinn, good to see you too. So I am excited. If you have questions that can fuel our conversations here at One Question with Pastor Adam for season 4, I would love to see them. You can put them in the chat section. You can send them over to me on social media, or you can email them to me as well. But today I wanted to talk about two things because two strange things have happened since we last met in the last episode. So the first thing is Lauren Boebert went to a theater and a very strange thing happened. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. And the second thing is today's question is, are you still here? So let me know in the chat section if you're still here, because on Tuesday, I think it was. Yeah, Tuesday was supposed to be the rapture, and I'm still here. And I see that Cheryl and Emily and Aislinn and Linda, you are all still here too. So it didn't happen. Surprise, surprise. So anyway, we're going to talk about both of those things today and see where we go. Now, did I want to talk about Lauren Boebert? No, actually, I didn't. I'm tired and sick of Lauren Boebert. But the reason that I'm talking about this situation at the theater is because I was on TikTok and I got tagged in somebody's video. And this person's video was talking about the Lauren Boebert situation at the theater and said, there are no Christians talking about this. No conservative Christians are really talking about this, and no progressive Christians are talking about this. And I'll admit, like, I hadn't done a video on it because I'm sick of Lauren Boebert. I don't want to hear any more about Lauren Boebert. I think a lot of this like political theater, if you know what I'm saying, is a distraction from a lot of other things. But this person was saying, basically, if you are a progressive Christian and you are not calling this kind of stuff out, then your silence is complicity. Now, I got shamed a little bit into doing a video on Lauren Boebert. I'll admit it. So I posted a video, and here's the thing that I want to say about Lauren Boebert's theater fun. Uh, she and her boyfriend were fondling each other, and she was vaping, and the woman behind her said, "Stop vaping," and she was just bad behavior. And she has since apologized for her bad behavior and is asking for grace, which is, she thinks Christians should be offering one another grace, and indeed we should. But here's the problem: is that Lauren Boebert claims to be a Christian nationalist. Lauren Boebert says that she was not in line with her values while she was at the theater. I'm not sure that that's true, because part of what Christian nationalist values means, a Christian nationalist wants to impose their version of Christian morality upon everybody else. But they don't have to play by the same Christian morality rules. they get grace and forgiveness when they go against their version of Christian morality because they're Christians. The problem is they don't pass that same forgiveness and grace onto others. Why? Because people who aren't like them are people to maybe be attacked. Our transgender siblings are suffering from this the most, maybe the most from Christian nationalists. We all suffer from Christian nationalism. Even Christians are suffering from Christian nationalism and would suffer from Christian nationalism because it is all about power. It is all about imposing their Christian nationalist ideology onto others. And at the same time, accusing others of trying to impose their ideology onto the rest of us. Do you see that? How that flip happens? At first, it was the gay agenda. You're imposing the gay agenda upon all of us, and then it's the transgender agenda, and trying to protect our children from what? From knowing that there are some people in this world who don't identify with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Like, that's such an assault on our children. Our children already know this. This isn't going to offend our children. And of course, what they will say is this is the sexualization of our children. Our children are already grow up in a world that is hypersexualized. I mean, you see this from Lauren Boebert, who's afraid of transgender folks sexualizing people. Well, here is Lauren Boebert going to a theater, and there are children there, and she's being very sexual with her husband. You see, all of these accusations are projections when it comes to Christian nationalism. It is like this inner self hatred that we as humans generally don't know what to do with unless we go in and examine it. And unless if you go in and examine our own inner self hatred, we might be able to manage it and deal with it in loving and compassionate ways. That's what Jesus means when he says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. I don't know about you. Maybe you don't suffer from self-hatred. I often do. And what's the best way of dealing with that for me? It is learning to love my shadow side, the parts of me that I find smelly and stinky and not so good. Right? That helps me not project my own shadow side, my own inner self-hatred onto others. But if you're not willing or able to do that work, if you have an ideology that uh, doesn't isn't conducive to doing that work, it just gets more festered inside of you and you project it onto others, which is, I think, exactly what Christian nationalism is doing. Everything that I've just described about doing your shadow side work, a Christian nationalist would say is what? Girly? I don't know. I wouldn't call it girly. I think girls are awesome. But they would say that's like women work, or that's too feminine or whatever. And this is the whole problem. When we don't embrace these different aspects of ourselves, we end up projecting it on others. And hey, if a Democratic politician, like say Pete Buttigieg, was at the theater and he and his husband started going at it like this, what do you think would happen? All the Christian nationalists would be all up in arms, saying that they were promoting and infecting everybody with their gay agenda, right? Well, is Lauren Boebert infecting everybody with her heterosexual agenda? It's This is just all this chaotic scene here. And so I just didn't want to touch it. But I can see how when we ignore these types of issues, our silence might be seen as complicity. And yeah, so as a Christian pastor, I think it's important that we call out Christian nationalism and its hypocrisy in trying to impose its ideology, its power for morality, imposing morality onto others, and refusing to live by that same morality. Um, so it reminds me of a passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, that has always been very troubling to me, which is where Jesus talks about a master who has a slave, and the slave owes the master millions and millions of dollars. It's like 17 years work of wages that the slave owes the master. And the slave comes to the master and says, "Forgive me, please offer me grace. I have my wife and my children, and there's no way that we can pay this off." And instead of throwing the slave in jail like the master originally planned, the master says, "Okay, your debts are forgiven. It's all good. We'll just wipe the slate clean. I'll show you mercy." Right. Well, then that slave goes to his own slave who owes him like $10. Right. I mean, the differences between here and the story that Jesus tells is just radical in and it might be like $100 or something, but it's a very insignificant amount. And the slave that was forgiven like millions of dollars treats the slave that owes him like $100. uh, that slave says, "Hey, forgive me, give me grace. I've got a wife and children." But instead of offering the grace that he had been given by the master, this slave throws that one in jail until he can pay it off. Well, the master gets word of this because other slaves are talking about it, and they go to the master, and the other slaves know, hey, this is not just what is happening here. This person has been given grace and refuses it to pass it along to others. And so they go to the master, and the master goes to the slave that was forgiven millions of dollars and says, "You wicked slave, I forgave you. Why didn't you forgive someone else?" So in this economy, this is the economy of God. Grace and forgiveness is something to be passed along. In our modern day, we would say, pay it forward, making amends, right? And if you don't pay it, if you don't pay the grace and the forgiveness forward to others who aren't like you, something happens to us. Something happens to our spirit. It gets stifled. It gets. It's like your drain. Are you with me here? It's like the drain in your sink when it gets clogged up with all that hair, and you got it just like that's like our soul when we don't pay forward the grace and forgiveness that has been given to us. And so you need the spiritual Drano to go into that drain and unstuck ourselves. That's the spirit. That's the spirituality of doing the shadow work. Is doing that kind of spirituality of liquid Drano in there. So I never really liked that, but this Lauren Boebert situation uh, helps me understand it a little bit more. Because if Lauren Boebert is given this forgiveness and grace, and she refuses to treat other people like our transgender siblings, our gay siblings, poor siblings with with grace. They don't need forgiveness, but with grace uh, and compassion. If she continues to treat them as pariahs in the world who need to live by her standards of morality, then she's going to get all clogged up inside. She maybe is all she, I mean, her past, she goes in and she flips people off at the theater, right? Uh, there's something clogged up inside of her. And hopefully she gets that liquid Drano. Maybe there's something clogged up inside of all of us, and that's the shadow side work. And as long as you can own that our drain is clogged and needs some liquid Drano, you're off to a good start. Am I making sense, everybody? Okay, Luke says the problem with this story in the first place is the monetary system which Jesus describes frequently. Yes, that's it. The story is, and how Jesus deals with it is an economic critique of the ancient Roman world and of our world as well. How on earth are we living in a society when somebody can be in debt millions of dollars, in this crippling debt? Right? I mean, that's exactly, Luke, what this story is getting at. It's Jesus is criticizing the economic systems over and over again, and we should be doing the same today. And Luke, you are always one to lead the charge on that. So, Lita, good to see you. Glad that you are here as well. Raylene, I laughed at that moment. Yeah, okay. The Lauren Boebert moment. That's awesome. So uh Jessica says that man was not her husband. He was her date. Yeah. And he is a restaurant owner. Well, this is the other part of that, isn't it? Who hosts drag performances, because why not be hypocritical on every level, I guess. That's funny. Yeah. Her boyfriend. Did I call her husband? My bad. But her boyfriend, yeah, is the bar owner who does drag events at his bar. So he's dating her, which seems weird. She's dating him, which it's just all weird. As Jessica says, hypocrisy on every level. Yeah, well, yeah, it's good to name that, Jessica. Thank you. Thank you. Glorious morning to you, Princess. Good to see you. Anything else? Calling out the hypocrisy of Christian nationalism is something that we've done here on the show before. If you want more on that, I did a episode on it last season in season 3, so you can go check that out too. So, Todd, you can't make this stuff up. That is right. That is right, Todd. My goodness. You laugh, you cry, you get angry. I don't know. All of the above, I guess. So now the second part of this episode is, are you still here? So Todd, I'm glad you're still here. Cheryl, I'm glad you are still here too. Yeah. So they recommend that you dump a bottle of Coke down the drain every so often. Go have a Coke. I did not know that. I guess I can see how that would work. Okay. A can of Coke. Who knew? So there's your liquid Drano and Coca-Cola. That's funny. You are all still here. I'm so glad. I looked on the internet and nobody was raptured on Tuesday. There was rumors that the rapture was going to happen on Tuesday because a viral video on YouTube from Generation 2423, that's the YouTube handle, said that there might be the rapture on Tuesday, September 19th. Is that? Yep, that was Tuesday. So these rapture predictors are hedging their bets more and more, because I think that they're coming on to the fact that, yeah, probably not going to happen. But so Generation 2423 came up with this hour and a half long video where he was describing why the rapture could possibly happen on Tuesday. So we're not quite sure, but maybe. I guess you could say that about any day, right? And then just be like, oh, we were wrong, but we just said it could be. So anyway, came up with all of this stuff about the rapture. And, if it doesn't happen that day, you're just going to change the date a couple weeks later, maybe a month later or something like that, So who knows what they will come up with next? As Todd said, you can't make this stuff up. But we've been making this stuff up about the rapture for 100 years, 200 years, maybe. You may be surprised that the rapture is not an idea that's found in the Bible. It's not an idea that's found in Christian history. In fact, it's an idea that's from the 19th century. Yeah, the rapture. That thing that has caused many of us salvation anxiety. I talked to a lot of people who say that as a child, they grew up in a church that emphasized the rapture, and they would wake up on some morning and their parents might have gone out shopping or something. They wake up a little later and nobody's in the house, and they start freaking out that they've been raptured up to heaven and they've been left behind. And just all of this salvation anxiety. Just take a deep breath, Adam. It's okay. So those who have tried to predict the rapture are batting zero. No hits, no runs, no runs batted in, people. So yeah, I would just, when it comes to the rapture, take a deep breath and recognize that, what's older than the rapture? The lawnmower. Submarines are older than the rapture. Fire extinguishers are older than the rapture. Steam engine, older than the rapture. Now, just because the rapture is so new doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's wrong because it's wrong. It's nowhere found in the Bible. And there are a few places where uh, John Darby, the person who came up with this idea of the rapture, uh, kind of looked to in the scriptures to say, "Oh, yep, there's the rapture." One of them is in the Gospel of Matthew. And in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus is giving some teachings. He tells some parables, and he talks about a day in the future where it will be like the time of Noah. And Jesus describes the time of Noah in a very strange way. If you remember back in Genesis, what would you say was the problem during the time of Noah? You would probably say, as Genesis says, uh, the human heart was evil and people were violent towards each other. Evil and violence in the book of Genesis is the reason for the flood. But Jesus describes it very differently. He says, it'll be like in the days of Noah, when the Son of Man comes. As in the days of Noah before the flood, there was eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. Sounds like a good time. Sounds like what Jesus was all about, right? Jesus came to have a good time. He came to eat with people and went to weddings. So he says, in the days of Noah, it was people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and swept everybody away. Interestingly, Jesus doesn't say that God caused the flood. Right? Whenever Jesus talks about violent things happening, he secularizes it. He doesn't mention, yeah, and God caused that flood to happen, right? Just a flood that happens. He secularizes God and violence, whereas before God was connected with violence. Jesus teases that out. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. When I first discovered that, I was like, amazing. So Jesus says, then two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal, taking together. One will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Now, this has been used by rapture theology to say Jesus is coming. You don't know the day when Jesus is coming, and you'll be just doing normal things like grinding meal and working out in a field, and Jesus will come and he will rapture up into heaven uh, some people and leave others behind. But is that what this passage says? No. I'm going to answer that for you. No, it's not what it says. There is that it talks about the coming of the Son of Man, and Jesus goes to people, but doesn't say that he takes certain people with him. In fact, it doesn't even say that Jesus is the one who is taking people. Some have interpreted this as the Roman Empire coming and taking people away, like similar to what happened in the year 70 to 73, when the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem. Is that what Jesus is referring to? Could be. Jesus doesn't say who is taking these people away. Uh, if Jesus is coming to these people and takes some of them, where does he take them? The passage doesn't say. It certainly doesn't say that Jesus raptures them up to heaven in some spiritual realm in the sky. Jesus, much more likely, if this is Jesus, is taking these people into the world to show it love and compassion and justice and mercy. That is much more in line with what Jesus does in his ministry. He doesn't take people away from the earth, he leads people into the earth, particularly in places that are in desperate need of more love and forgiveness and compassion and justice, right? And this is also where the book of Revelation comes in, because the book of Revelation is also known as is used by rapture folk in order to talk about the rapture. But the book of Revelation is not about escaping the earth. At the end of the book of Revelation, it's about heaven and earth coming together. It's not about escape. See, the real problem, I think, with rapture theology is that it is escapism. Jesus is not about us escaping this earth. He's about the transformation of this earth. There were other forms of Christianity in the early church that did talk about escaping the earth, that said that the the goal of spirituality is to become not united spirit and earth, but to escape the earth and go into some heaven. The early church said, no, that's heretical. Why? Because according to the early church, the earth is good. They looked back to Genesis and said, the earth is good. It is part of God's good creation. And our job is not to escape the earth, but to care for the earth and to love the earth. So Jesus's ministry was all about sending the disciples into the world to show it more love and grace, mercy and compassion. So that's what I think is happening here in Matthew chapter 24. Certainly, somebody looking at Matthew chapter 24 would not look at it and say, oh, obviously that's talking about Jesus coming back and taking people out of the earth up into heaven. There's nothing about that in there. So there you go. Now the second one is that rapture theology often looks to is First Thessalonians chapter 4. And in this passage, the Thessalonians are concerned about the people who have died before them. What happens to them? This is like one of the big questions that we have today as well. It must be one of the big questions in the human heart. What happens after we die, right? And here Paul is trying to answer that question in a compassionate and loving way towards those who live at the church in Thessalonica. Now, they're also expecting the return of Jesus, the second coming, within that generation. And that generation is starting to die out. So they are like coming to a bit of a spiritual crisis because they've been expecting Jesus to come back and bring heaven and earth together. They are not expecting Jesus to come back and rapture folk up into the air and take them away from the earth. They're expecting Jesus to come back to the earth and reign with love and compassion. I see, Jeff, that you've got the gospel is anti-fascist t-shirt and the reign of Christ, as the letter to the Hebrews says, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That means that Christ does not change. So if you view Christ as the loving Savior who comes to bring a more just and compassionate world now, that's how Jesus is always going to be. Rapture theology often has it's based on a sense of dispensation. There are different times, different dispensations, or different times when God acts differently throughout different dispensations or different epochs or times. And the letter to the Hebrews goes absolutely against this because it says that Christ, who the letter to Hebrews thinks is somehow one with God or reveals who God ultimately is this timeless principle, the Christ principle, and is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So it's not that God has these different dispensations, and in one dispensation, God is violent, and in another dispensation, God is nonviolent. And then in the end, God's just going to go back to violence again, right? No, that's not it. God, Christ reveals is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So when Christ comes to reign again, it will be the reign that is not associated with violence or fascism, as Jeff is pointing out here, but it will be the reign of ultimate love, compassion, forgiveness, and justice when all needs are met. That's what we are talking about here when we're talking about the second coming and Jesus coming back and reigning again. So anyway, so First Thessalonians, Paul is trying to answer this question about what happens to the people who have died before us. And Paul says that the Lord himself, Jesus, with a cry of command, with the archangels, call and with the sound of God's trumpet will descend from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Well, okay, Adam, you may be asking, that sounds kind of rapture-esque to me. Hold on. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up in the clouds together with them to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. So, Paul is encouraging the Thessalonians, letting them know that death doesn't have the last word, that resurrection and love have the last word, and we will all be resurrected with Christ. Now, why isn't this rapture as we understand rapture? Because it does not say that Jesus or the Lord will come back, rapture everybody up, and then go off to heaven somewhere to escape the earth. No, it doesn't say that. In fact, if you want a really great deep dive into this, the best book is Barbara Rosing's The Rapture Exposed. High recommend on this one. She writes about this passage in First Thessalonians, and she talks about the meeting of the Lord, where people go up and meet the Lord. And she says this: Paul's description of meeting the Lord in the air employs a very specific Greek word for greeting a visiting dignitary in ancient times. Apon Apontesis. Okay. Lita, you can correct my Greek there. Apontesis, a practice by which people went outside the city to greet the dignitary and then accompany him into their city. The same word is used in Matthew chapter 25, verse 6 to describe the bridesmaid who go out to meet the bridegroom and then accompany him into the feast, and also in Acts 28:15 to describe the Romans who go out to meet Paul as he arrives in their city. And then she goes on to say that nowhere in the ancient world does this word apontesis mean to go meet someone and then go back to where that person came. No, they go meet that dignitary and then they go back to the people who met them, to their city or village. So this word where the people rise up and meet Jesus in the sky means that they are coming back to the earth. This isn't escapism. This isn't about escaping the earth. This is about meeting Jesus and coming back to the earth for the transformation of the earth. The book of Revelation speaks frequently about the renewal of all things. This isn't the abandonment of the earth. This isn't about the escaping of the earth. This is about the renewal of the earth. That's what Christianity is about. It's about the renewal, the restoration of the material world, not escaping the material world, but loving, redeeming the material world. Why? We can blame humans, maybe. Because as Genesis tells us, humans who were meant to be co-creators with God in the world, co-workers of God in the world, to care for God's good earth, went in the other direction. And the earth suffered for it. Whereas before, the earth was maybe soft, easy to work with, the soil became hard because of human activity, human sin. And we see this today as well with climate change. Human action, human sin, you might say, and sin just means missing the mark. Sin are the ways in which we don't follow Jesus in loving God and loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. Sin against the earth are ways in which we fail to love the earth and care for it. And so we see this with climate change. We see this with the oil spills that infect water and wildlife that frequently happen. And many other ways in which we fail to care for and love the earth. Humans have a way, we're seeing with climate change, of sinning and bringing everything down with us. And so the book of Revelation talks about the restoration of all things, including the earth. here it's important to make a distinction that the New Testament also makes between the earth, the soil, which is the word in Greek "gay," just in English "ge," and cosmos. Cosmos has connotations not of the material world, but cosmos can often refer to, especially in the New Testament, the powers and principalities of the world, the forces, political forces, religious forces that go against the will of God. This is what Jesus means when he says that he has conquered the world in the Gospel of John. I think it's John 16, maybe, where Jesus says, I have conquered the world. He doesn't mean that he has conquered the earth and the soil and the trees, right? That would be silly. He has conquered the world, the systems that lead to violence and oppression, as Luke has pointed out beautifully, the economic systems that lead to violence and oppression. Jesus says that he has conquered those systems not by refusing to play by their rules and playing by different rules and showing us how to conquer those violent and oppressive systems as well. This is what Paul talks about when he talks about the powers and principalities of the world, those powers and principalities that go against the desires of God, that we love one another. So when the New Testament talks about the destruction of the world, it's talking about the destruction of the cosmos, the destruction of those forces that lead to more violence and destruction and oppression in the world. It's seeing those things as being destroyed or washed away as the new heaven and the new earth come together as they were always meant to be. And our job now, if you want to think about rapture at all, our job now is Jesus is always coming to meet us here on earth in order to help us participate in the renewal of all things right now. This is what Paul was getting at in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19, where he says that in Christ, God was reconciling the world back to God's self, not counting our sins against us, not counting our trespasses against us, and entrusting us to the to the ministry of reconciliation. We get to participate in that now. That is heaven and earth coming together now, and we get to play a part in it. So for me, that's what the second coming is all about. Jesus is always coming towards us, and there you go. Now there are some other passages from Christian literature outside of the New Testament that people who believe in the rapture say this teaching of the rapture has always been with us. And you can look these books up. They are not very long, and you can find them easily through Google online. One of them is called The Shepherd of Hermas. This is an ancient Christian text, and it's got an apocalyptic vision in it where the shepherd sees a beast. This is in Vision 4 or chapter 4 of The Shepherd of Hermas. And yeah, this is like early first century uh, Christian literature. And the shepherd of Hermas sees a beast coming towards him. Now, beast here is metaphor for the earliest Christians for empire, for that cosmos, that the powers and the principalities. So when the book of Revelation talks about the four beasts, it's talking about four empires that are coming after the early Christians and creating some sense of tribulation. Now, tribulation just means suffering, right? So these empires that are based on violence and oppression are coming to get you. And the shepherd of Hermas has a vision where this new beast is coming to get him. And he has a vision of a woman who is the church personified as a woman, coming to be with him and giving him some encouragement during this time when he thinks that the beast is coming. And the church, personified as this woman, says that an angel of the Lord is coming to save him from the tribulation of the beast. and he will not have to go through the tribulation of the beast. Now, rapture theology claims that this is an ancient teaching in the early church of the rapture. But I hope you begin to see now that it's not. Why? Because Jesus is nowhere in this vision 4 of the shepherd of Hermas, nowhere coming down to meet the shepherd and rapture him up into heaven to escape the beast. He escapes the tribulation of the beast and the suffering that the beast imposes on him. How? It doesn't say, but it certainly doesn't say that he's raptured up into heaven. Uh, you get much more of a sense that he is able to run away, go into the desert or the mountains. In fact, this is what many of the early Christians did in 70 CE when the Romans came and tried to destroy the city. They fled out into mountains, mountain regions, into deserts to escape the violence that it was going to cause. So there is no rapture in the shepherd of Hermas as the rapture is taught today. The other one is the Didache in chapter 16. The Didache is very short. So if you are wanting to increase the number of books that you have read this year, go check out the Didache. It's 16 short chapters, and 16 is the final one, and it is an apocalyptic vision where there is a time of suffering, a time of tribulation that is coming, and the Lord will come and all of his saints with him. And then shall the world behold the Lord coming on the clouds of heaven. This is the same pattern that we see in the New Testament and in the shepherd of Hermas. This is the second coming of Jesus, but there is no, I'm taking you all up into heaven with me. It's Jesus coming to the earth and bringing heaven and earth together, not about escaping the earth. So whenever you hear about rapture, just remember all of these stories from the early church aren't rapture. They're not about escaping the earth. They are about Jesus coming back and renewing the earth and saying, hey, I'm inviting you to be participants in the renewal of the earth. And Jesus is inviting us to do that now. Not just the renewal of the earth, but the renewal, the restoration of our lives, of our relationships, and of maybe of the cosmos. You know, Jesus says, for all that I've said about the cosmos and how it has these connotations of being the powers and principalities that lead to oppression and violence, including economic, political, religious oppression, and other forms of oppression as well. Jesus also says, well, in John chapter 3, John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world. The word there is cosmos, right? Jesus comes that the cosmos might be renewed, remade, that the powers and principalities that are based on violence and oppression might be transformed into new systems that are about justice and restoration. Can we have systems that lead more towards that? I think that's what we're working for. I think that's what we're fighting for. So, okay. Let's see. Let's get to some questions. Tammy says, "Oh, hi, Tammy. Tammy says you are leading people to hell." Well, Tammy, I would love to know what you mean by that. It's interesting, Tammy, because I would let you know that on the day between Good Friday and Easter Sunday is called Holy Saturday for Christians. And it's on this day that Jesus goes into the depths of hell, and Jesus transforms hell and turns it into heaven. If you want more on this, Tammy, you can read a book called Christ the Conqueror of Hell and see how this way that Jesus deals with hell is rooted in not just the New Testament, but in ancient Christianity. See, Jesus does not lead us in a mission that escapes the horrors of the world, but Jesus leads us on a mission that enters into the hells of this world in order that we might help transform those hells. So Jesus leads us straight to hell. Jesus' mission is not about escaping this earth, but about entering into it, including the places of hell here on earth, so that we might bring heaven with us. So, Tammy, I hope that that helps you understand a little bit more about ancient understanding of hell, and where Jesus goes to the place of weeping and gnashing of teeth on the cross. This is hell on earth. And what does Jesus do there? He brings heaven with him to the two criminals who are hanging there with him. This is the day that the Lord is high and lifted up, sitting on the throne of his glory, with his feet firmly planted in hell, and he brings heaven with him. Somebody give me an amen in the chat section. Tammy, just to let you know, Joshua on Facebook says, I hope Tammy has a blessed day. So, Tammy, we are all hoping that you do have a blessed day. Raylene says, here with us all the time, inviting us to be part of the ongoing healing while we're present in the flesh. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Like Jesus comes to us when we are in our hells here on earth. Jesus isn't afraid of hell, and he invites us to join one another so that we know that we are not alone in our hells here on earth. So, yeah, thank you for that, Tammy. I wasn't expecting you to go there, but I appreciate that. Oh, Aislinn, you have COVID again. I am so sorry. We'll be praying for you and hope you feel better very soon. Cheryl, I'm glad that you are not planning on going anywhere soon. Glad that you are still here, my friend. Let's see. Lauren, Cheryl, I'm not going to say that. Yes, Lauren Boebert has come up with a new nickname. We've come up with her. I'm not going to say it on the show, but Cheryl, thank you. That's funny. Let's see, Luke, we need more unions, and we need our unions to be militant class struggle unions. Yes, amen to that. Princess, good to see you. Disney does it all in all their princess movies. Yeah, missing the connection there, Luke, but I'm, there's a lot to criticize about about all of these things. So, okay. Okay. Jessica says, I grew up as a JW with Armageddon predictions. So rapture predictions have never phased me. Oh, Armageddon predictions. Yeah, I mentioned John Hagee. I remember I grew up in a church that didn't talk about Armageddon, didn't talk about the rapture. So I was kind of saved from all of that kind of salvation anxiety. But every once in a while, I did watch a John Hagee show where he had all of those signs and things where there were all the drawings and the beasts and all the stuff. And who's the beast this year? Maybe it's China, maybe it's Russia. Certainly it's not the United States. Oh my goodness, that's a joke. The United States might be the most beastly. Uh, um, our hands are everywhere. We love the military industrial complex. Things that Jesus did not love the military industrial complex of his day. He worked against it. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. The United States as the beast empire. That's interesting. Somebody should write a book. Savannah says, every year of my life, the rapture was supposed to happen. Yep. Yep. Sometimes multiple times a year. That's right, Savannah. Batting zero on that one. Raylene says, well, if the made up rapture happened, we're all part of the left behind. Yeah, it might actually be, as we're talking about this, the Christian thing to do would be to be left behind. Uh, because the whole goal of Christianity is not to escape this world, but to embrace it, to love it, to help in the transformation of our bodies and souls and the transformation of the earth, the healing of the world. In fact, in the book of Revelation, when the heavens and the earth come together in the New Jerusalem, right there in the middle of the New Jerusalem is the tree that has the leaves for the healing of the nations. Not the escape of the nations, but the healing of the nations. And the other thing that's so important about the book of Revelation that is easy to miss is that in the middle chapters, 17, 18, and 19, it's the kings of the earth who are the major problem, the major human problems. They are the ones who are causing all of this war. Interestingly, what is the role of the followers of Christ when there is all of this tribulation happen and these kings are going to war with each other, the kings of the East and the kings of the West? What is the role of the early Christians in that? It's to not engage. It's to not get caught up in the violence, in the warfare. It's to not get distracted by those things and to stay committed to loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And so there you go. That's the goal. So maybe with all this rapture stuff, we should be thinking that if you're left behind, you're the true Christian because you are the ones who are here doing the work, not escaping from it. Luke says, I'm more concerned about the climate rapture. Yeah. Climate Armageddon. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. NASA is predicting an asteroid strike, but not until 2182. Well, thank you for that, Cheryl. That's good to know. Maybe by 2182, if humans are still around, they'll figure out a way to move that guy a little bit. Who knows? Jessica says, my class is about to start. Okay. Hope you have a great class, Jessica. Let's see. Okay, Jeff, here's the gospel is anti-fascist one. I've worn my gospel is anti-fascist t-shirt many times. Nothing but thumbs up and positive comments. Same with the Jesus loves science. But yesterday I wore my new Jesus is woke shirt. 3 people called me out on it quite aggressively. In one case, claiming that wokeness was sin and damnation. Sadly, I didn't have time to engage them in a reasoned dialogue, but I don't think they'd have been interested anyway. Well, Jeff, I love that you wore that shirt. And can I love that it got that kind of reaction? It's interesting that the Jesus is woke shirt was so scandalous and the gospel is anti-fascist was not. That is really interesting. I'd like to do more thinking on that. But fortunately, Jeff, you know this. I have all of the Jesus is woke verses. Well, not all of them, but some of them. There are so many of them on that t-shirt. So just as backup. So we've got our receipts right there on the t-shirts. That's awesome. So Raylene, so likely so if they're offended, good for you. Yeah, there you go. Joshua, you're late, but you're not raptured. So I'm glad. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for your email earlier this week about still being here too. So that's awesome. Robin, happy Friday to you in Australia. Good to see you. All right. So Joshua says, people like to make and find reasons to leave earthly responsibility. Earth isn't evil. It's the disqualified mindsets of perpetual stiff-neckedness that makes Earth evil. It's interesting. Nobody really knows what like stiff-necked means. It comes from I think it's the book of Exodus, where God or Moses, one of them, calls the people stiff-necked people. And I heard one rabbi once say it's as if their necks were stiffed and they were always looking in one direction. So they were always like turning in circles because they could only look in one direction, far to the left or far to the right. And so they just get caught up in circles and doing the same thing over and over again. And nothing new happens. So, yeah. Let's see. Pisces Bambina says, Amen. Pisces Bambina, good to see you on YouTube. So, okay. Joshua says, also, I remember the religion, depression, anxiety of the Left Behind series from the 2000s. It's a trip watching people gaslight people into believing they will be left behind by a loving God. Well, that's it. God doesn't leave anyone behind. We are all in this together, and that's what the renewal of all things, the restoration of all things, is all about. God doesn't leave anyone behind. So thank you for that, Joshua. Raylene says, this was a big part of my early indoctrination: fear, shame, hellfire, and brimstone. The only hellfire and brimstone that we need to fear is the ones that we create for ourselves. And oftentimes they are created by the powers and principalities and are inflicted upon the most vulnerable. And so that's what Christian nationalism is. Raylene, you're helping me connect the dots here in this episode. So Christian nationalism is its own kind of hellfire and brimstone that gets channeled against people who are vulnerable. And as a Christian pastor, I know you're all with me on this. As Christians, part of our job is to stand in between the hellfire and brimstone that many Christians throw against people who are vulnerable. Our job is to stand in the way and make sure that we do what we can to stop that from happening. That's where our friend Tammy comes in and says, you are leading people to hell. There's a certain sense in which we are leading one another to hell in order to stop hell from happening for people who, for all of us, and especially for those who are most vulnerable. So let's go, people. I love it. So, all right. So that is it for this episode today. Thank you for being here, and we'll do it all again next week. One Question with Pastor Adam is a product of the Raven Foundation. You can find out more of our work at the Raven Foundation, where we explore religion and violence and the connection there, and how we can overcome the connection between religion and violence and lead us towards a religion that moves towards nonviolence and more love and more peace. That's how Jesus would have it. So let's go in that direction. So yeah, we'll do it all again next week. This is season 4, and I need some more questions. So if you've got questions, you can send them to me over email. You can send them to me at my social media. I'd love to see your questions, and we'll do it. Will we do this next week? Yeah, I'll be here next week, Thursday at 11 o'clock, as long as the rapture doesn't happen. Did you like that? Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, the rapture isn't happening. Jesus is coming back. Jesus is back. Jesus is coming back, and to restore the earth, not to help us escape. So Joshua says, Christian nationalism reminds me of what the Sanhedrin did with the Romans. I wonder if Tammy knows anything about that. Yeah, the Sanhedrin's working with the Romans, complicit in all of that. So Joshua, good reference there. So, all right, dear friends, hope you have a great rest of the day. Until next time, God be with you.